Bwana wa mabwana, tunaleta sifa, twaleta dhabihu zetu kwako, shukrani zetu kwako. Ulishinda vita, ukatuweka huru, sasa tunakuja mbele zako. Let's take it from the top. Bwana wa mabwana, tunaleta sifa, tunaleta dhabihu zetu kwako, na ulishinda vita, ukatuweka huru, sasa tunakuja mbele zako. Aya, tukisema hakuna Mungu mwingine kama wewe. Pokea sifa uishie milele. Na wewe ni Bwana, say wewe ni Bwana, Alpha Omega. Tunainua sauti zetu leo tukitangaza ukuu. Pokea sifa, baraka, heshima. Ufalme wako ni wa milele. Ewe Bwana wetu. Amen. And his kingdom shall know no end, and his glory shall know no end.
And welcome to the season finale of season 5 of Tuesday Connect. We are so glad that you could join us today. And this is a special Tuesday Connect, and here's the reason why: because we have a live audience. Yeah, I did not pay them to do that. They are here on their own volition. And so we are so glad that you could join us today. With me are
Ted Wahome
and
Samithiga
and
John Agagwa.
And all we want to do today is to answer your questions. And so before we do that, we want to celebrate the fact that we have had so far, this is the 65th episode of Tuesday Connect, and that's no mean feat. And so we just want to find out from our audience here if there's anything that they have learned. Lest tukue sisi ni wale tunakaanga tu hapa. And then, yeah. So I just want to hear, is there anyone who has been learning something from a Tuesday Connect episode? Anyone who remembers something from a Tuesday Connect episode? Anyone who'd want to share? Feel free. Please feel free.
They are camera shy.
They're shy? Maybe we should sing a song as we wait for them. I don't know. Katambi, I see that you have the mic. I don't know if you want to share something.
I was supposed to give it to whoever has something to share. But, repeat your question.
My question is there anything that you can remember from a Tuesday Connect episode that stuck with you?
Yeah, so I remember during COVID, I had plugged into Tuesday Connect because it was something that used to keep me busy when I needed to hear about the Word of God. But something that struck me was an episode which was after you messed up, what next? Mm-hmm. And it really spoke to me about guilt and how we try to create this picture-perfect persona and present it to people. And then one day something just happens and you trip, and now they see your quote-unquote true colors.
Okay.
And it really helped me navigate that scene. Yeah.
All right. Asante sana, Brian. All right, anyone else? See Bundi there.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, Kathy. For just say a few things. I really enjoyed this season, mostly the episode on side hustles. Was quite an eye-opening thing. One of those of these things are they are allowed, but are they beneficial? So just finding a balance between why we do the things that we do. So I found that quite helpful. even to a friend of mine. So thank you for that. I think I enjoyed this season. It was a blast.
All right.
Yes.
And thank you for being part of it. So does it mean that the side hustle that you have was closed?
Speaking of for a friend.
Okay. Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. Of course. Thank you, Bundi. I see one more on that other side.
Good afternoon, everyone. The episode that I enjoyed, I remember specifically Kigums came to give her experiences of her younger days. I think that was sometime in COVID. And she really shed light on how she navigated her, her young adult life, and I really took a lot of lessons from that, just especially in the space of relationships and how she approached that space. I think I really appreciated that so much, and that stuck with me for some reason. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Asante sana, Connery. At Tuesday Connect, our aim is to answer the question, what does the Bible say about the things that affect us in our daily lives? And I'm just going to go ahead to the questions. I know that these guys are roaring. They're ready to go. They're ready to go. So now, John, that you gave us and you need to ask. So let me ask this question. So in one of the episodes of Tuesday Connect, we talked about the fact that we should not allow ourselves to be apathetic when it comes to matters election and on our civic duty. So someone asks, so what then would you say to a person who's been directly affected by the effects of electioneering? So say, for example, a person who lost a loved one during the post-election violence, or whose house was burnt down by people who are rioting and stuff like that. What would you say to such a person?
I think the first thing is to really condole with that person. It's one thing to know that humanity is sinful. It's another thing to be a victim of humanity's sin, especially at levels as deep as when you lose people just because of the sin that is in people's heart. And so to that extent, I just want to sort of sympathize with the person and say that I can see how and why that somebody who's gone through that kind of difficulty, and it's directly tied to bad politics, would just want to keep their distance from something that would cause such an evil. That said, however, I would encourage them to think of themselves more as a solution to that problem, because the reality would be that in as much as that is a difficult space to be in, pulling away doesn't help solve the problem. It seems right. It's like one of those things when it seems counterintuitive, but pulling away doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So my position would be this: that if we think about the situation, you're probably seeing the effects of bad leadership and bad politics. Like, that's how bad it can be. Like, it can be as bad as causing the evils that we saw in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And many people lost their lives, their businesses, their livelihoods.
Yeah.
And so if that's what bad politics can do, we should be grateful to God that we are in a society that we have a voice on who gets to the top. Like, we have a voice that can change a system that could produce something that bad. In the latter years that most of the world has grown up in, it was basically a monarchy. You are at the mercy of the king. If the king is evil, that's it. You can't do much to change him.
Yeah.
But we live in a society where if we can see that this is what bad politics can do, it can cause such terrible loss of life, and especially those of us who've been touched by that, I think that there could be a sense that you could make a case that that's actually even more reason to want to be the Christian voice, the light in that, so that by the time we are seeing a leadership, you could honestly say, I did my best, I went, I voted, and hopefully my vote will count to putting someone in leadership that will make sure that nobody has to go through what I went through because of a failed electioneering or bad politics in the past.
That's a great answer. Thanks for answering that, John. I have a follow-up question that I think I'm probably going to ask Ted. I've had people saying, I will not vote because there is no Christian candidate. What would you say to that? You would say that I should ask John?
Exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
But let me attempt. I think maybe just to sort of piggyback on what he said, there's a sense in which having, like, I enjoy food. I know it doesn't look necessarily, but I do enjoy food. I love food, and I love well-seasoned food. But the thing about seasoning is that for it to actually have an impact, it has to have contact. And I find it interesting that in Matthew 5, our identity is tied to who we are, like the pictures that are used, that of light and salt, is very, very helpful for how we think about how we engage with the world.
Right.
We kind of don't, in a sense, have an option to sort of do it from a distance. And let me say this right from the start. I truly understand the apathy. I think many times I have to fight the apathy in my own heart and in my own life, especially when politics doesn't have a real bearing on my day-to-day life, right? So I totally understand it, and so I'm a comrade when it comes to that.
You're a what?
Comrade. Comrade. Yes. Companion.
I know.
Right? I'm a companion when it comes to that. And so I think that's the first thing, just to emphasize on that I think contact is important.
Okay.
For you to have some well-seasoned food, you need that salt inside the food. If you enjoy with kafirifiri, you know, like you have to have it inside your food for it to have an impact. As to whether we should always choose a Christian candidate, I think you just need to read the Bible to see that God doesn't always use Christian people to accomplish his ends, right? When you look at even when the children of Israel had just come back from, or actually were coming back from exile, he used Cyrus, who he said was my hand. You know, this is the great Persian king who did not necessarily, you know, like worship God and stuff. But God advances his purposes, you know, regardless of who he's, you know, is at his disposal in a sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they are absolved of their responsibility, but it does mean that God can actually use even people who are not necessarily Christian. So I would say sometimes you find yourself where you don't have an option per se. Vote for, you know, whoever you feel at least will perhaps further, you know, service to humanity and help people, you know, receive the leadership that they need.
All right. Asante sana. Remember that we are here for you. We are here to answer your questions. And so please feel free whenever you have a question to raise your hand and somebody will see you and get a mic to you. As for you guys who are online, we are here for you as well. So please feel free to go down to the comment section and write a question, and we will be answering those questions as they come in. But John, you had something to say.
Yeah, I think just on that point, I think sometimes it's easy to, especially for Christians, to take a moral high ground and assume that by virtue of being a Christian, it automatically means that you are a better person than somebody who's not a Christian.
Yeah.
But the Bible is replete with examples that that's not always the case. Case in point, we know that Cornelius was not a Christian.
Do you mean Cornelius?
I mean Cornelius.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was just trying to see if you pick up on that.
Like comrade.
Yeah,
Comrade.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Cornelius,
Thank you.
the Bible says that he was a devout man who feared God and who gave alms to the poor. And by the time an angel is showing up, is because he has such a habit of prayer. And yet the angel says, send for Peter, because Peter will tell you words by which you shall be saved. So the angel acknowledges that the man is not saved, and yet the Bible says that his prayers rose up as a memorial before God. So I'm using that as an example to say that Cornelius, I mean, if we're being honest, puts a lot of us to shame, right? A lot of Christians don't give to the poor. A lot of Christians don't pray consistently, don't have a devout fear of God. That's not to say they are not Christians, but it's false and I think wrong to assume that just because somebody is a Christian, they are therefore a better father, a better husband, a better leader, a better, something, just because they are a Christian. And also to assume that somebody who's not a Christian, because they are not a Christian, they are therefore a worse leader, a worse, and all. And I mean, if we even read through history, just African history, political history, you'll find that there are many people who did not hold a Christian profession, but really did great as leaders. And then you can also find several examples of people who held Christian professions, but did not quite do as much good in those offices. So I think sometimes when you're thinking about leadership, it doesn't automatically mean that if somebody is a Christian, they will therefore make a better leader.
That's true. All right. Sam, it seems like you have something to say.
It's looking like we're flogging a dead horse here, but I just want to contribute. That's what you're saying. The God is not limited in using only Christians. So that if you see there's no, like, let's say a confessing Christian on the list, you go like, oh, God, it's going to be a tough 5 years because God doesn't have people to work with. But it's not true. In fact, the Bible does say God raises up leaders and disposes them.
Yeah.
And we know that there is no authority unless that which the Lord has instituted. So we can say on the one hand, every person who's become a leader, God has had a hand in it, which is a tough truth to accept, a tough pill to swallow, especially because we know some leaders have not been very, very good. Yeah. But we know that God is sovereign even over men's evil works.
Yeah.
And sometimes he's still able to bring good through evil. One case in point is God told Elijah to appoint somebody to be the king of Aram. Remember that time when Elijah was depressed, and so he was coming out of that, and so he told him, go anoint Elisha, he's going to be take up after you. Anoint, I think Jehu will be king in Israel, and then he also told him to anoint another guy who will be king over Aram, which was tough. And the Arameans at that time were oppressing Israel. And so this guy would be the one to replace a guy called Ben-Hadad, who was the king. And when Elijah met with this guy, Elijah was almost like crying, had tears in his eyes. This person was like, why are you like this? He's like, because I know what you're going to do to us. And the person was like, me? A dead dog like me too, But I think just a case in point to show you that God was sovereign even over who was going to become ruler in Aram. These were not Christians, these were not believers, these were not Jewish people. Yeah. So I guess for the Christian who's struggling and wondering whether God is limited only with Christians, God is not. And he knows he can use what he has. And raise new ones.
Right, let's switch gears a little bit. There's this episode that we talked about an investor. I don't know if you guys can remember. And Kadu was here saying, don't take his money, don't take his money. Let me paint a scenario, and then maybe, Sam, you can tell us what your thoughts are, because we did not seem to conclude that matter. So there's a person who has been praying to God because their business has been doing well and needs to expand. And they've been there asking the Lord to provide stuff like that. And then an investor comes in with the exact amount of money that the person needs.
Angel investor.
An angel investor. In fact, they don't even want anything to do with the business. They are an angel investor. So they come and they are willing to put in that amount. But with time, as the owner is doing due diligence, the owner realizes that there's something a bit shady about this guy. So this owner would take this money and build the business and, tithe to the church and support children's homes, like just do great and wonderful. Great and wonderful and mighty. Great, wonderful and mighty things. So do you think, like Kadu, that this person should not take the money? Or do you think, like me, that God provides in various ways and we should just be content and thank God for the gifts that he gives us in various ways?
Do you have the number of that guy?
That's the main question.
You have a few needs that.
Yeah.
So just to clarify your question, you're asking, is it okay for a Christian to accept money from shady sources?
Money that you suspect comes from shady sources. Of course, if a person is like a drug lord and then he wants to come in and like tithe to, like the church, I mean, that's something different. But like you said, you've had fununus here and there that person has yeah.
Okay.
Define shady.
Ted really
On a
wants this money.
spectrum of shadiness, what amount of shade are we talking about?
How much would you want?
I see what you did there.
Njoo ufanyiwe maombi. I think for me, if one of the things is that God has given us a conscience, and especially if you know, like you say, you suspect that this money is coming from shady sources. One of the things that you should never do to your conscience is to violate it.
Okay.
Conscience should not be violated. I think you should do due diligence. You have a moral responsibility to establish that you're not doing money laundering, for example. Money laundering is really how people clean their money. They take money from sources they don't want those sources to be known, and then they put them in legitimate businesses because they know somewhere down the road the money is going to come back to them in a clean way. So you don't want to be a conduit as a Christian of money laundering. People do shady businesses there. You don't know, they rob banks, they do drugs, then they bring your money to you to clean it for them. I think we do have a moral responsibility to find out, to establish, and if that's the case, to say no. No matter how tempting it is. I mean, the Bible has talked a lot about money.
It's the exact same amount that the person was praying for.
Go to the Lord and say, Lord,
From a better source. Would you use a clean source?
I see this temptation and I'm now biting this. It could be a test. Who knows? I mean, we trust that the Lord who was able to bring that money from a shady source, if he was able to do that, then surely he can be able to bring it from a clean source. Because the scriptures have cautioned the believer, be careful about love of money. And we know that we all have this weakness about money. When it comes, we just want to quickly, take it. But the Bible has said it is the root of all kinds of evil. And many people who, because they have loved money and they have not asked themselves those moral questions, they have pierced their lives with many sorrows. And so for me, I would tell that person to take it to the Lord in prayer. Take a bow. I mean, we just did this message just last weekend about Hezekiah.
Yeah.
Who he tried to put off, the king of Sennacherib, who was coming to attack him by giving him gifts and so on.
Yeah.
But that never worked. What really worked was when he went to the Lord in prayer. And overnight, God was able to change it. Now, I'm not saying God will change your situation overnight, but take it to him. Take this issue to him and say, I have this money, but I sense it's not. Okay. It's not coming from a good source. And I think we should not avoid those conversations. Yeah, but the conscience should not be violated.
Yeah. There's actually a verse, Acts 24:16. This is Paul speaking. He says, so I always take pains to have a clear conscience before both God and man. So I really like that you brought that out. As far as especially our conscience is concerned, that's one of the big ways that Christians make decisions. We Christians don't do stuff that injure their conscience because God uses our conscience to lead us in the direction that we need to go.
Yeah.
I'm also reminded of what Paul says to Timothy, do not be a partaker of other men's sins. He wasn't saying, Timothy, don't do the same sins those guys are doing, because he's telling Timothy, do not be quick to lay your hands on people. He says, because the sins of some people take time before they appear. He says the sins of other people are readily visible, but the sins of others sort of take time for you to see them.
Yeah.
So in other words, he's saying, even though you might not be seeing the sin of this person at this point now, I do not want you to lay hands on them, because if you did, even though you're not seeing the sins of this person, you will have been a partaker of that person's sin. And I think it would apply in this situation. Yes, because of that suspicion, you're thinking this might be one of those cases where the sins of that person will take time to appear, but even now, it's important to take steps not to be a partaker of that person's sins by accepting money that injures your conscience and that you suspect come from a shoddy place.
What if your conscience is not injured? You just need money, and money has come, and you're praising the Lord.
Exact amount.
Exact amount. But that's important. Exact amount.
I think it becomes a question if the person is a Christian and they have a conscience. And we're hoping that if you are a Christian, then your conscience is not seared. Otherwise, then the question does not even arise. If you don't care about what you do, sources of your money, you don't care about such, the question ceases to exist. But the question, I'm assuming we're even discussing it in the first place because the person, first and foremost, they're eager to please God. They're eager to do good. Otherwise, if you're not eager to do good, you don't care, your conscience is seared, why are we here? What are we talking about? You get my question? Yeah, so check your heart. Yeah,
So-
and I think we should be the sort of Christians who, first and foremost, are eager to do good because we are concerned about the glory and the honor of Christ. We want to please Him. Yeah.
You see, if the person in question is actually, he is the one suspecting, I suspect that the money I'm getting is from a shady place. If it is the person suspecting, then I think it's important that we are clear in our hearts that that person needs to know that we care more about that person's heart than about their money. Like, it needs to be clear that I actually care more about your soul than about the money that you're giving me. So if I suspect, if I think that your money could be coming from a source that is less than reputable, less than loving, then it is I shouldn't be quick to receive your money, even though I suspect that something could be off. It should be clear that I'm like, hey, by the way, let's pause on this, your money. I've heard that this and this. Is it true? And if that's the case, then my goodness, I can't receive this money because I really hope you stop doing that. And I would encourage you in that part. So if you suspect, I think you have a Christian responsibility out of love and conscience to not accept it as a statement that I care more for your soul than for the money that you can give me. But on the other side, if it is other people, you're not the one who suspects, it's other people, then for their sake, because you are a Christian, and the Bible says that we should not do things to stumble other brothers. You know that if I engage in this particular business relationship, other people who suspect this guy is not clean, they are going to be kwazwad. They're going to be like, why is that person a Christian and is doing business with such and such a person? Then I still have a biblical responsibility to investigate the matter and be like, hey, bro, you've been giving me money or something like that, but there's a concern here. I just want us to hash that out so that if somebody ever came to me, I can actually confidently say, no, the money that this person gave me is clean. I've done the due diligence. But I shouldn't ever say to another Christian, I'm not sure where the money comes from, but at least it meets my needs, because that's not a good witness.
And also, lastly, because I said earlier on, if your conscience is seared, then the question does not arise. But I think it does, even for non-believers. Because money laundering, for example, is a crime. Is a crime, and the state is trying to stop that.
Yeah.
People trying to wash their money through legitimate businesses, trying to stop that. So I think even for the non-believer, there's still a moral responsibility there to not allow somebody to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Ted, you have a question that you want to answer yourself. You have your own question?
And an answer to it. All right. I think the question was asked in one of the episodes, and this has to do with piracy, right?
Yeah,
I know
any reason why you're the one who's asking the question and answering it
this has
yourself?
nothing to do with.
Don't worry. We are going to do an altar call after this. So your conscience are.
In fact, I think, Ted, maybe we should just get to see.
Yeah.
Is there, okay, how many guys here have
Pirates.
legitimate...
How many guys here are pirates?
Yeah, how many, no. How many guys here have legitimate means of streaming stuff? Let's just see. So Netflix, Showmax, Spotify.
People are like, what is legitimate?
Yeah, sure.
Define
sure.
legitimate.
Spotify, Apple Music, something like that. How many guys? All right. Or you, I mean, other than YouTube, YouTube is free, so just remove YouTube.
They have some of them have a legit torrents.
I'm sorry. Oh, right. How many guys have had that legitimate streaming site, have paid for a legitimate streaming site the last 3 years?
Why would you pay for what is free?
So,
security.
clearly, Ted, your question is for all of us.
It's very relevant. So
okay, other than some. All of us, other than the senior pastor. Yeah.
He's putting us to shame, in a good way. So the question really has to do with, and we talked about this at some length. Should we, based on the fact that we don't have access to some things like music or movies or even books, should we just utilize also what has been freely provided by various sites, various platforms, freely provided at a cost to someone, but free to me? Should we actually make the most of it?
But at a cost to who?
That's the big question.
At a cost to who?
All right, so let's do this. I don't know if we will take maybe just a comment here, but I'd like actually to hear a response from the crowd, if that's possible. But maybe let me start with Ngoja. Some will ban.
We'll pour cold water on this conversation before it starts.
Exactly. So John.
In fact, I think we should just ruka Sam and just finish this conversation without him saying anything.
Go on, John.
Oh no, it was for the.
No. We'll start with you. Maybe as someone gets ready in the crowd.
And then Sam puts me to shame at the end.
No. First of all, I think let me just say something. There's been development in this area. I saw in the newspaper the other day. I think Safcom and I don't know which other one of these telcos that sell data has been put on notice to block streaming sites for live matches and the games that are on DSTV. So DSTV are taking the matter, I think, to court. So some of these data companies have been put on notice to make sure that they ensure that those people don't access matches through those two. Those two, what do they call them? URLs to, so that people...
The gifts. The gifts, yeah.
And you know how sometimes you go to certain stores where like one DSTV dish serves an entire neighborhood, like 50 homes.
Yes.
My illegal connections.
Sharing is caring. No?
So I say something about it.
Do you want to?
The question is whether we want you to say something about it.
I feel like once he speaks, all of us will have to come for do an altar call, no tears and crying. Yeah, I don't know.
So we could hear the people. What questions do you have about the free stuff you're watching?
Now that you're watching it. Or what are your thoughts?
Anyone? Just raise your hand and the mic will come to you.
Do you think that piracy is an African problem or it's just a Western problem?
No, when you put it in those terms, once you start calling it piracy, now you make it.
Okay.
No, nobody can touch it.
But what would you call it?
It is what it is.
I told you we shouldn't let Sam speak, right?
Piracy is international, as in it's not just African. Even guys from abroad, guys are streaming stuff down and they haven't paid for it. So we can't say that it's African. It's a sin problem. It's a humanity problem. Let me say that.
Hey guys.
Man,
The question.
I think we should have probably said, don't give Eric. Yeah.
Okay, so don't
So
give
is this
Eric
question-
Wells, don't give Rapson, don't give...
Let's give Kadu. We give Kadu.
Please, Kadu,
So-
speak
Kadu-
for us.
Kadu. Yeah,
Kadu
yeah.
will redeem us.
My question is this:
Uh-huh.
so we need to define first of all what piracy is,
Yes.
because I'm thinking Pirates of the Caribbean.
No.
I'm thinking to perspirate. That is still piracy. All right. So, what is this piracy that we're talking about? The assumption here is that everybody understands what you're talking about. I mean,
Do you mind defining it for us?
you are the one who asked the question.
All right. So maybe this is this is not a technical, definition, but I think we kind of, those ones we know what it is. But maybe to attempt to give an explanation, it's accessing things through illegitimate means. So whether that is content that has been copyrighted, patented, and so getting it, like say, for free. So if it's a book, getting the PDF version. If it's music, getting it from an unpaid streaming service or something like that.
So if we start from the verse where it says the earth is the Lord's and
And
everything
its
in
fullness
it,
thereof.
is that such a thing as piracy, really?
Yeah.
That's the proof text.
Well, if a company has offered, let's say they have a free version of it, and I go there, get it for free, it is them who have offered it to me. I didn't ask them to give it to me. So I've just come, you've offered, I've come, I've taken it. So I am not a pirate to that extent. You have made it available in such a way that it's for free. I've gone there. And just to exonerate myself, I don't download things freely like that. So I am not a pirate. But whenever I go to a site that there's something free to download.
But you see,
The
all
free
these
is
sites
good.
are free to download.
Free is
no?
good, but this is another twist. Some companies would give you something on a trial basis.
Right.
They would say, for 30 days, you get premium, let's say a software, premium something. Now you've gotten it for 30 days. Some people would go and create a new email address to get another free 30 days. Like,
Isn't that creativity?
let's talk about that. And I can see somebody taking notes. Okay, how do you do that?
You're giving people ideas.
Yeah.
See, I think it's that idea for Romans 7 where I did not know what coveting was until there was a law.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If I could take a jab at this, let's just acknowledge, first of all, that sometimes, the way they say, like, for instance, stolen, what's that verse? Stolen water is sweet. First of all, have you realized how sometimes you might be watching a series on Netflix, and then on Netflix, inaisha?
Ama hakuna.
Ama hakuna. But mimi, especially it's those ones of, imeisha sijui season 3. But I know Manjoro, my movie guy, has up to season 5B.
But is that pirating?
So that's the
But
question.
you see, you're going to pay for that CD, are you not? So if you think about it like that, then you're actually paying
Because
for
Manjoro
the...
is HBO.
I don't know. I mean, if it becomes
And even
his problem.
on the links, you pay for the internet that you use to
John,
get the
thank
links.
you. Yeah.
It's not free.
Yes.
So, first of all, I think the key word in defining piracy is unauthorized use
Unauthorized use.
of someone else's whatever.
Thank
all right?
you, Kadu.
So, is there a law in the government that outlaws people accessing that content? And if that be the case, then why is the content freely available? All right? I think that would be the first question, because sometimes I think we over-condemn ourselves where there's really no sin. And of course, I'm using that lightly. I'm saying that lightly. All right? Don't put me in a box. So where there is no... there's no law against it in the land, and that is why it is easily accessible. If Manjoro can sell it publicly, all right, without fear of consequences, then obviously, I mean, surely, how can that be piracy?
He added surely, guys.
I think-
Surely. The intensity of the seriousness. Once surely comes up.
All right. I'll allow Sam to make a comment, and then maybe we can try and conclude these thoughts.
So I think the piracy laws do exist. I think they're very comprehensive. In this country, those are some of the reforms that have taken place, I guess, in the law. We've tried to define that to protect people's rights, intellectual property rights and so on. Those laws are there. I guess it's the implementation that is usually a challenge, but just because they're not being enforced, or you don't see askaris, cracking down on people, doesn't mean the laws do not exist. The laws are there. I guess for us who are believers, we ought to ask ourselves, what is the spirit behind the law? Mm-hmm. Not just look at the law itself and its prohibitions, but what is it trying to do? We should be concerned about that. For me, I would say, whenever people create stuff, people have taken time to create this thing. They have labored. They have spent hours, time, their own resources to create this thing. And they have even gone ahead to put some copyright, something on it. Mm-hmm. Because they hope to benefit from it. How is it loving for me to go and take this material that they have copyrighted, because they hope to benefit from it, and then I use it myself without any regard for that person and their effort and all the labors and so on. I think for me, when it started becoming an issue is I usually love this, or when I was young, I was using these softwares by Adobe. Mm-hmm.
Even those ones are illegal.
Let me just say those softwares are expensive.
Oh.
But when those...
How many guys knew that you have to pay for Adobe?
So there's the version that is free. The readers, the Acrobat, the readers, right, and so on. But there are those that create. Those softwares are expensive. But when the software starts, you see the names of people who created it. It puts names of the people who created this software. And people labored for this software to be on the market.
Yeah.
And to be honest, those softwares are complex. And I was trying to think, my goodness, the algorithm, just the creative thought that went behind this software. And that time you have a cracked version on your hands. It is injustice of the highest order. It's an atrocity. It's to the people who put in the effort. If this software is really going to benefit me, if I really need it and it will do good to me, mm-hmm, why don't I sacrifice and pay and thank those people, put them in business so that they can continue to create these useful products for the rest of us to continue using? Get my point?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about them to reward them for their labor, but also they need us to think like that, because that's what will put them in business. That's what will keep them creating stuff.
Yeah.
Some people are creative and they try their hand in music, for example, but they get out of music industry because they say it does not pay.
Yeah.
So you could have had a creative person using their gift, but they cannot attempt to do that because they will sleep hungry, because all you are not paying for their property. I think for the Christian, we ought to think about such things. If people are working hard, if this is a legitimate means of business, then I want to support that. I want to keep this person in business. And if it's really benefiting me, why should I not work hard and pay for it? I think if we adopted that way, especially on things that are intellectual property, then we would have a world that is really good. Because we don't pirate or commit, I don't know how to call it, commit piracy on the things that, like phones, for example. If a phone is a hardware, so I have to save up money. Some of you have iPhones and very expensive phones. But if phones were like a software or something, some people might have pirated that. Now, if I can spend like 100 Gs to buy a phone, why can't I raise 50 Gs to buy, a software that is really helpful to me? So we should adopt that way of thinking, and do the harder work, I think, as Christians. That's what I would say. Yeah.
I think you see why we did not want Sam to speak at some point earlier, just on a light note. But honestly, Sam, I think you've really hit it at, on the nail. And I was reading, in my devotions, I'm reading the story of Saul and David. And one of the things that has really struck me is how Saul had a legitimate reason for nearly everything he did. One time, he was going, I think, to some battle, and the soldiers were sort of getting afraid. And so Samuel was taking time to come, because only he could come and like offer a sacrifice. And so he decided, okay, fine. The practical thing is, man, soldiers are going, we need to go to war, and this guy has not come and blessed the offering. So let me just go ahead and do it, right? And based off of that, actually, later, God says, because you have done this, I have rejected you as king, you know? I can't remember what, you know, there was another thing, again, when I think he was supposed to go and kill all the Amalekites. And then he was told, commit everything to destruction. Like, kill everything, devote everything to destruction. And so he said, okay, let me do that, but hey, man, hey, there's I don't know if they had Fresian cows, you know, there, that were so fresh. And he was like, no, now let me do this. Hence their Fresianness. So
Love it.
So was told, decided, let me take this. And in fact, when he came to Samuel, he said, man, we have obeyed. And then Samuel asks, hey, what is the noise that I hear? I hear the bleating of sheep. I hear, you know, I don't know if he said the mooing of cows or something. But he said, I hear, what is that I hear? And Saul said, hey, no, you know, actually we decided, let's take these nice looking ones and let's sacrifice them so to the Lord. So, you know, very legitimate reason. And yet on those two accounts and on other things I think that Saul does, God rejects Saul as king. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, how many other times that I actually sometimes have legitimate reasons for doing stuff, right? And then I decide that this is what to do. But faith sometimes looks a bit weird. Because some of this stuff that we are saying, by the way, actually maybe appears a bit too harsh or a bit too drastic, you know, like, man, yani, why would you even think like that? But who knows, man? I think you decide to pursue the harder road of walking in faith, and you just might discover that there's actually a blessing up ahead. David was a man who had his flaws, but I think one of the things that he could not do was he could not intentionally violate his conscience and do that which was wrong. Many times he had the opportunity, for instance, to kill Saul. But he decided and said, in fact, I think twice, right? He came close. One time he would cut the hem of the garment and go and then come later and say, man, yani, his conscience would be so disturbed. And he said, far be it from me that I should lay a hand on the anointed, that I should touch the Lord's anointed. By the way, that verse is really talking about the king, David, you know, right? Not the man of God, in a sense. And then another time he actually goes and, you know, Saul is sleeping and he's stuck a spear next to his head. So he takes it together with a few things and, you know, he just says, I can't touch the Lord's anointed because this is God's anointed man. And so I think I'm challenged, honestly. I won't implicate myself, but I say I'm challenged, and I think one of the things that I tried to do just right after campus is, for instance, I said, okay, fine, let's start at least with music. I'll start with music and you know, pay for one of these streaming services and stuff. And you realize by the way, it's actually also not too expensive. You know, you decide to go that direction in getting music and stuff. You can get stuff for like 200, 300 shillings sometimes, even on Spotify and stuff. So I don't know, maybe it's something that we as Christians can start to do and start to pursue, you know, might be helpful.
Let me give my last thoughts. It's a story, just because you mentioned David. There's a time when David did something wrong. He counted the men for battle, and then the Lord brought a certain something, a plague, I think, of sorts. And so David wanted to make a sacrifice, and then he went to the land of someone where an angel had been seen. And then he said, sell me this property. And the person was like, no, please take it. It's yours. And he said, I will not offer the Lord a sacrifice that costs me nothing. David was not a cheapskate. Probably you could say he could afford, but there was just an attitude that he had, you know, for, no, let me have to spend. You know, I guess it's a little rebuke for us who like freebies, you know. There he was being given actually a freebie for real. And he says, no. I need this thing. It's going to benefit me. It's going to benefit us. I want to pay for it.
Yeah.
You know, what an attitude David had. And I think I've just remembered it because you mentioned David. And let me say one last thing about the whole piracy thing. You know, the Lord could be trying to keep you from certain stuff. And the way he has kept you from them is msoto. But here you are, through the back door. Unaingia unakuta mamovies zingine hata uko unafaa watch, because they are not useful for you. But when you decide, look, I will access only what I can pay for, you will actually be kept away from a lot of stuff that is harmful for you, So it is actually one of the ways in which the Lord purifies the saints, is when he puts you on the narrow path.
When he allows you to not have money.
Indeed, it has its blessings.
All right. Asante sana, Sam. I want us to conclude this session by just maybe each person saying one thing about this topic that we talked about. It was an all-girls conversation that we had. The topic was just about how life can sometimes be very scripted for us, and increasingly so in this society that we live in. We see people living incredibly ostentatious lives.
Glory, glory.
Ostentatious. Yeah. Incredibly ostentatious lives. And you keep wondering, this person is this age, how are they able to do that? And I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about how we should guard ourselves against thinking that that's the life that we're pushed. Right after saying ostentatious.
What?
Oh my goodness.
The Lord, he gives grace to the humble, but he brings down.
Continue, Kosawa. You're speaking the spirit.
As I was sharing, what was I even saying, man?
You are shaposh.
Welcome to my channel.
So here's the point. Here's where I'm going. Do you have anything that you would like to say to a person who has been given a platform and has amassed a good following of people and has quite a bit of influence over people? What would you say? Because I know that there are a number of guys who are influencers, so to speak, that interact with this YouTube channel or that come to this church. Or maybe there's just going to be one person here and there who probably just passes by. Is there any wisdom that you would like to share? Maybe we can start with John.
I think a good safeguard is to always learn, not just for influencers, but as a principle in life, to look beyond the conduit to the source. Because oftentimes we get stuck at the conduit. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you can look, for example, at the life of a good Christian, not even somebody on social media or anything, just a good believer, maybe comes to Mamlaka, they are wealthy, they have a certain kind of life. And it's very possible to look at that and be so fixated on that. Like, this is what I want. I want what this person has. In which case you're walking very close to covetousness. What you need to do is to look beyond the conduit to the source. Look to God and be like, okay, it seems that it has pleased God to make this possible for this person, and I glorify God for that. So that if we are always looking to God, we will not be caught up with what God is doing in some specific person's life and want what God is doing for that person in our own lives. Because then it means, in a sense, it's limiting God. So one of the biggest problems actually with social media is that people look at the life that this person is showing on social media and they go like, yeah, I want that. This is what I want. So they use that life to define the faithfulness of God. So they decide, okay, so faithfulness.
Oh man, could you just say that again?
God. Oh yeah.
Man, because that is serious.
Yeah, because you look at, so this is the character of the faithfulness of God. The faithfulness of God looks like driving a certain kind of car, living a certain kind of life, not paying to a certain kind of vacation, doing a certain kind of car on your 10th anniversary, etc., etc. Oh wow, look at how God has been faithful. But your description of the faithfulness of God is is this thing that you're seeing. And nothing could be further from the truth. That was the temptation and the danger of the children of Israel in the wilderness. They went to the wilderness, and then God says there are certain lessons that it will take the wilderness to teach you. So trust my loving hand, even in the wilderness. But soon enough, what did they say? They said, God doesn't love us. Why? Because we don't have onions and garlics.
Onions.
You know? And what? And watermelons, right? They're like, God has brought us to the wilderness to kill us. So what was their problem? Their problem is they used the standards of Egypt to qualify the faithfulness of God.
Yeah.
So if God, you won't give us what we had in Egypt, then you're not faithful.
Yeah.
And there's...
They also wanted to have other kings. Do you want to have a king?
Like
just
other nations.
They
Yeah.
always had that other nations problem.
Yeah.
The issue, and that continues, we are very much like the Israelites. The problem with that is this, and you see, we know how they ended. Bible says because they lasted, God decided they would die in the wilderness. At one point, they were like, give us meat. In Egypt, we had meat. And God says, you want meat? I'll give you meat. It will come out of your nostrils. And he did, and it did, and they died.
It sounds like something a Kikuyu mother would say.
An African, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is that oftentimes, and that's the interesting thing about that story, they limited the faithfulness of God to a particular something. And even in our generation, people have limited the faithfulness of God.
Yeah.
They've said, okay, so if God is going to show himself faithful to me, he'll allow me to buy a land somewhere, build a house somewhere, drive a certain kind of car, then surely God has been faithful to me. But if I never get to own a land, always live in a rental to the day of my death, and never get to drive, I'm always in public transport, then people look at that and be like, man, in the way he served God. And they don't think that God was faithful to them. The problem that I have with the influencers, many of them, especially the ones that hold to a Christian faith, is they paint a faithfulness of God that is not scriptural. They give people the wrong things to look at to mark the faithfulness of God. And the reality is actually the opposite. Sometimes, in God's judgment, he will allow people to have what they want. Sometimes just the ostentatious life, that you talked about. Sometimes
Church and
ostentatious life is sometimes not a mark of God's blessing, but a mark of God's judgment.
Oh man.
And we see that in the Bible. The Bible says there were a certain group of people, Romans 1, Scripture talks about how they hated God, refused to keep the knowledge of God. He says, therefore God gave them over to themselves. Think about Sodom. Sodom was pretty prosperous.
Yeah.
I mean, they had all the money, and they were living, and you see, it's very possible for somebody they were reading ostentatious lives, right? It's very possible for somebody to have gone to Sodom and be like, and that's what happened to Lot, right? I mean, he went to Sodom and was like, wow, look at just... this place is great, right?
Yeah,
and it's possible to look at that and be like, see how God has been faithful to Sodom. And yet God in heaven was actually just counting days. He was saying, if you guys don't change, this is me being gracious to you.
Yeah.
If you guys don't change, this is a sign of my judgment. And eventually the sign of God's judgment would come. And we must also remember that the most perfect, most righteous, most holy person that ever lived didn't drive a car. He didn't drive the latest thing. He didn't wear the latest thing. He was pretty poor. He was, like somebody has rightly said, he was born in a quote-unquote borrowed womb. He rode on a borrowed donkey. He was buried in a borrowed tomb, and he left zero inheritance for his mother, proving to you. So by the time he was dying, he told his mom, please be taken in by John.
Yeah.
He had nothing to leave for her. He died as he was. And there was no greater blessed person in the earth. Sometimes we use the wrong things to teach us the faithfulness of God. This is obviously not to say that God doesn't bless with wealth. Of course he does. He blessed Abraham, he blessed Jacob, he blessed everything. But when we decide that that is the defining aspect of the blessing of God, then we have moved our eye from the source and been too fixated on the conduit.
Wise wisdom. Yeah. I don't know who wants to go next after that.
Just demolished those guys who, Christ has been painted to have been very prosperous. That his garments were like some sort of Gucci of those days. The donkey was like a new ride. So it's interesting that, the real picture is that he really had nothing. So powerful.
Perhaps just to emphasize the same point, when I was in campus, I went and visited a guy. He used to work in one of our sister churches. And he gave us an illustration that I thought was very helpful. He said, if you read the scriptures carefully, you realize that human life is described as but a blip. You've seen that? I don't know what it's called. The blip. The blip. that machine that tells the vitals and the heart rate and stuff like that. He said it's just but a blip on the line of eternity. Or if you like, it's just but a dot. And he said, it's interesting how the world tells you, live for the dot. Moses, in Psalm 90, actually talks about that. He says, for all our days are pass away under your wrath, we bring our years to an end like a sigh. So, actually, maybe we can all just take a moment and sigh. That's our lives. That's what verse 10 says. The years of our lives are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. That's how God describes the entire human life. A sigh. A dot. So I would tell any influencer or any person really who has been given any kind of influence, live for the line. Don't live for the dot. Live in light of eternity. You know, one day we're going to stand before God and we're going to be held to account for the influence that we were given, for the resources that we were given, for the minds that we were given, for the relationships that we were given. So how are you going to stand before a holy God, and what are you going to say? So for Yani, for crying out loud, live for the line, not for the dot.
It's a wonderful place to end. Live for the line and not for the dot. We have come to the end of Tuesday Connect Season 5, guys. Yeah. We just want to say thank you to everyone who has been able to make this season a reality. There were so many panelists that were up here that did an amazing job of preparing and thinking through the topics that were put out for the sake of your benefit. And the guys who actually came in to be our live audience. It's a very, very first time, and thank you for coming in. Thank you for your psych and your energy. We thank God for you. Thank you for joining us for Season 5. Look out for Season 6 of Tuesday Connect. But from us, God bless you. See you guys in Season 6 of Tuesday Connect.
Ninashangaa nikielewa wewe ni zaidi ya vile nilivyoambiwa juu yako. Ninashangaa